All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley from Wholesaling Out of the Box, and today I'm joined by Jacob McPherson. And today we are talking about virtual wholesaling. So we discussed this a little bit on last week's episode where we talked about going into the Richmond market and going into North Carolina. But I wanted to bring Jacob on and discuss his experience with going into Nova, which is Northern Virginia. Because that was a very different experience than what we were doing in the other places. And that was kind of our baby trial run too with the Nova markets.
Yep.
So, Jacob, I just want to start with why did you choose Nova and what cities up there did you choose and why those specific cities?
Sure. Okay. So my wife's family lives up in Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania to be specific, and we're up there quite a bit, spending time with family and such. So it kind of made sense to go ahead and just kind of take a look at the market and see what things were doing. And my mother-in-law is a realtor, so getting access to MLS was actually something that was a little bit easier in that particular area than maybe it is in others. Didn't require as much networking and so on. Still spoke to the broker, etc. But it was relatively easy to get set up there. Just based on the relationships that we already have. And that's a huge piece of virtual wholesaling, are the relationships that you have in whatever city it is that you are looking to potentially start investing in. So, because obviously building that team out, having those people in place to assist you with that is going to be key to your success. So that is why we decided that we would try Nova. And specifically, we started with Spotsylvania, Stafford, and the city of Fredericksburg. The reason for that is those are the larger areas where the vast majority of deals were being done. We were able to determine that by looking at the MLS and basically just pulling information, right? So doing research, data mining, just like we always do, and determining what the cash sales were and really just kind of how much movement we had in that area. So that's that in a nutshell.
Gotcha. So would you say that Fredericksburg or going up into Fredericksburg Nova was more of a half virtual wholesaling to start because you did have your wife's family up there. And for those of you guys that don't know, that's about what, 3 hour drive from
Yeah, 2.5, 3 hours. Yeah.
So it's something where, like with Richmond and with North Carolina, anything in that area, if something major does go wrong or we need to go up there, we can. It's not necessarily the thing we want to do, but it's possible to get up there pretty quickly. So do you think that made it a little bit easier to kind of shift into that virtual wholesale mode?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Especially when you're first starting out, right? You're still to a certain extent trying to figure out, what are the important pieces that I need to put in play in order to make something like that happen, right? Like that's really the big question when it comes to virtual wholesaling is, you have your basic wholesaling process, right? But now you've taken yourself out of it entirely. So are you still able to accomplish the things that need to be done in order to make a standard type of deal or transaction happen, right? Like having somebody go on a property walkthrough or go meet with the seller to take photos, things along those lines. It was definitely easier in Fredericksburg because I could go up there, right? I mean, worst comes to worst, it gave me a reason to go and visit with family members anyway. So to have a property walkthrough in that area to go to was really not a big deal, and definitely made things easier overall for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good point, is like that idea of having feet on the ground is what we call it. So one of the big ways to find deals, especially in the newer markets, is by driving for dollars. And you recently hired someone locally, of course, for us that is doing driving for dollars, but you've created a system where we can scale it. We can take that, put it in a different market, put it up in Fredericksburg, Richmond, North Carolina, wherever we choose to go next. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that? Like how you found someone to be our feet on the ground? How would this work virtually? And yeah, just anything else about that.
Sure. There's a lot to unpack there. So I'll try to keep it somewhat surface level, but I mean, the long and short of it, right, was the hiring process. So starting to ask yourself the questions of, well, what is it that I'm looking for when I go driving for dollars? Like if it's me and I'm the one who's doing the driving, what are all the steps in the process that I accomplish? And then how can I take that and then train somebody else to go and do it? That is the short and sweet. So that is essentially what we did. We built out a system, a handful of systems using an app. Specifically, we started with batch driven. I understand, I mean, there's a ton of different programs out there that would allow you to do that, right? I mean, I hear a lot of talk about Deal Machine and a lot of people using PropStream, things along those lines. We just happened to be using batch driven at the time. That's what we started with. I'm not saying that that's the end all be all. We're still testing it and still working on it. So maybe that changes moving forward, but right now it seems to be working pretty well. To get somebody up and running, it was 2 to 3 weeks of a hiring process. And with the hiring process, we marketed on a couple of different platforms, but ultimately vetting is a huge portion, right? And that's going into hiring anybody for any position that you would want to bring them on for. I mean, the first thing that we do is always talk about the core values of the company and make sure that whoever we are talking about potentially bringing on agrees with and will meet those core values, because that's important to us, and we want everybody that works with us to have those same things important to them. So once we got through the hiring process, then it was a matter of basically training, in this case, Ron, the gentleman that does it for us, training him to go out and look for exactly what I would look for or what we would look for, and get him in the car and start making it happen.
Yeah, awesome. And I want to go a little bit back to the hiring process, because one thing that we did too, or you did, you decided to tell them to go out and I wasn't totally sure what it was, but so forgive me if I'm wrong.
That's
but
okay.
like you asked them to identify a property that was in distress, a distressed property, and
Yes.
then send it over to you too, right? Was there more to that? But why do that? And then what was that exactly? Because I did not explain it well.
Sure. So, no, that's a really good question, and you explained it. I think you explained it just fine. So, so the reasoning behind that is that in any hiring process, I think the question is always, what type of candidate do you have, and are they actually going to work with you, right? And are they going to put in the time and the effort and energy? Because, starting something like this is taking a lot of our time and energy, right? And we definitely do not want that to be wasted. So giving them that initial task of, hey, go out and, identify a property, like just within a block or two of your house, right? I mean, it can be out while you're walking your dog. You don't have to go out in the car, you don't have to do anything crazy. I just want you to identify a property that you think needs some fixing up, and then bring it back to me and post it as part of your interview process. And out of 24 applicants, we had 2 people do that. So, and to me, that speaks volumes, because as far as I'm concerned, those other 22 people, I don't care what you look like on paper. I don't care how great your resume is. I don't care if you had a 4.0 in college, whatever have you. If you can't even do one simple task on the front end, how can I trust that you're going to do all the other tasks that are going to come along with the job? Mm-hmm. So we chose to do this because we wanted to weed people out immediately. And as far as I'm concerned, that's exactly what we did. I mean, we weeded out 22 out of 24 people almost overnight. Mm-hmm. So, and then the guys that did come back, I mean, the gentleman that we hired, he's awesome. I can truly say that. I mean, he communicates well. He's consistently talking to me about any potential issues he has inside of the app, or if he thinks of a way to do the process better, right? Like, those are things that we are all for. So, and giving him the task up on the front end is really just a way to weed people out that are potentially going to be problematic for you down the line.
Yeah. So, yeah. I definitely agree with that. And that actually, when Sean hired me on, there was I had to make a video that was like answering 4 or 5 questions, and it had to be under 3 minutes, and it was so specific. And I found out later, of course, that he got it from someone else, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But he told me that I was the only one that sent a video. So
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy that people don't do that. But okay, I want to kind of shift a little bit into like how the process changes when you're virtual. So for example, a virtual walkthrough, making offers over the phone without seeing the property, getting pictures and getting a lockbox versus something to be able to get buyers inside. What does that look like from your end?
That's a really good question. So,
And how does it
um,
differ, sorry, from like, wholesaling in person?
sure. So, I'm going to try to break up your question, right? So it
Mhm.
was, we'll first talk about what it looks like to understand the condition of the property. So when you first start off in wholesaling, one of the things that you absolutely need to know is how to estimate the condition and the repairs associated with any particular property. And believe it or not, that's really easy to do over the phone with enough practice. So because numbers are, for the most part, about the same. Like a kitchen is 10 grand, right? A bathroom is 5. A half bath is half of a full bath, right? 2.5. HVAC 6,500. I mean, these are numbers that we teach, and we go out, we do our monthly property walkthroughs, and for anybody who is looking to estimate repairs, I can tell you that's a great place to start. And that's not me pitching it from a wholesaling out of the box perspective. That's where I started, and it was extremely helpful for me. And I'm always going to recommend anything that was helpful to me. So
Yeah. Side note on that too, I would recommend though, talking to local contractors, other local real estate investors, and just making sure whatever numbers you have also work in this new market. Because in
yeah,
some places it won't. It's not universal. So just double checking, like, hey, is this kind of what your estimates look like? And they can say, no, I think a bathroom is more like
yep.
grand, not $6.
Yep. And the best way to do that is to reach out to at least 3 contractors in your area for a specific job, specific estimate, and just ask them for, ask everybody to give you the same type of estimate, right? If I were going to do a 14-box kitchen with new granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, what would that cost roughly, right? So, but yes, that is a good point because those numbers will change based on the market that you're in. These are our numbers that we know. We did confirm they work up in Nova as well. And it seems like they actually work around the entire state of Virginia. So,
Mhm.
um, so yeah, so if you're in the state of Virginia and you don't know how to estimate, definitely a good place to start. So, but doing that, so when you're new, right, you get so many sellers over the phone that they just say like, well, just come look at it, right? Just come look at the house. It's like, well, I appreciate that. And eventually I would love to do that. But I mean, the last thing I ever want to do is waste your time. And I definitely don't want to waste mine. I'd really just like to see if we're close. And I'm pretty good about being able to estimate things over the phone. I've been in the business for a little while. So if it's okay, I'd like to just kind of ask you some questions and see if we're close. See if I can just get like a 5,000-foot view of condition. Would that be okay? Right. So, and most of the time the sellers will typically say, yeah, that's fine. Right. So then you're going through what we refer to as a virtual walkthrough over the phone. So you're asking about basically everything from the outside in, from the top down, and you're asking about all the big ticket items. So any major repairs on the inside of the home. You're probably going to ask about windows, roof, central heating and air, electrical, things along those lines as far as big ticket items on the outside. And you're just going to kind of assess based on what they have to say. And after you do that enough times with enough sellers, you'll eventually get to the point where you know roughly what the number is over the phone. So like I can tell you right now, for the most part, that if a seller comes to me and they say, I need an HVAC and I need a full-blown remodel on the inside of the house, so floors, paint, kitchen, baths, right? I know that over the phone, we're probably around 30, 35 grand. If we start talking about things like electrical and a roof and so on, the number's going up, right? So by taking that and doing that over the phone, you can eliminate a lot of time associated with going to actual properties. And that's where it's really, really important to be able to do that over the phone when it comes to virtual wholesaling, because now you're paying somebody to go to a property, right? It's not you, or at least likely it's not you. So you definitely don't just want to send anybody out to any property when you don't know anything about it, because that's just money out of your pocket at that point, right? It probably doesn't make sense. But if you can get really good at qualifying over the phone and understanding what the number is, and then talking about numbers on the phone with the seller in that phone call to see how close you are, that's going to be where the bang for the buck is when it comes to virtual wholesaling, is that understanding. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. It
I'm a little
answers it really
long-winded. I
well.
know. I'm sorry, guys.
It's okay. Um, yeah. So then once you get to the making offers section,
Mhm.
then how does that differ?
Um, so yeah, so over the phone, I mean, we always look to try to be within about 20, 30 grand over the phone. So we get to the point, right? We've done the virtual walkthrough. I know that it needs 40 grand. Sometimes I'm in front of the computer, sometimes I'm not, right? Maybe I'm in the car.
Mhm.
So asking the seller the question of, okay, all right, so sounds like it needs a little bit of work, but what is it that you were hoping to ultimately walk away with, right? Or what's the end all be all here, right? Just any way to ask them a number. And some of them are gonna, everybody's heard the if you speak first, you lose, right? I mean, we're in the information age. Everybody knows that now. So
Mhm.
most people are probably going to be like, oh, well, I'm not really sure. I got to talk to my wife, husband. Okay, well, let's just say, you did go talk to your wife, right? You had that conversation. What do you think she would say? Right? Okay, well, let's talk about that then, right? And maybe they say, oh, I don't know. I got to think about it. Well, just from the hip, what do you think? For whatever reason, that follow-up question, it just resets the seller's brain 9 times out of 10. And all of a sudden they rethink it and they actually come out with a number. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. So getting the number out of them over the phone is the other critical piece here, because again, you don't necessarily want to go on a walkthrough if you're $100,000 away from where you need to be versus what the seller is asking for, right? That just doesn't make sense. So did I answer your question there?
Yes, you did. Okay. Um, that's like my main questions. So now I want to get into like the cons, I guess. What are
Okay.
the cons that you see for virtual wholesaling?
I think the biggest piece of it is going to go back to the systems and processes that you have in play.
Mhm.
If you are going to be truly successful at virtual wholesaling, that's going to be the most important piece. Without a strong system in place, without strong team members and good boots on the ground who are reliable, it's going to be really, really hard for you to keep that going because, we all only have so much time.
Mhm.
So then it becomes well, where is your time going to be best spent, right? Time value of money. And what does that look like? So if for whatever reason your systems on the ground were to fail, what would you do?
Mhm.
So I think those are the cons associated with that. And it's not really a con. It's just something that you have to be cognizant and aware of and just understand that that's really critical to what you're trying to do, right? So getting that part of it right is incredibly important.
Mhm. Okay.
So
And I think one con on my end too is it's harder to network. And that's something that we saw with COVID. All of the local real estate investors groups had to move to an online format. It was great. We still got the information, but it showed that there are some limitations to what you can get out of things online.
yep.
And there's just something about going to 2 or 3 events per month, seeing the same people there, getting your face in front of everyone, and that kind of thing that really helps you become part of that real estate community in that area. And
Yeah,
so that I think is one of the harder takeaways too.
I agree. And that's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about that because we've been a little bit more fortunate, I think, up in
Yeah.
Nova, like we had said. So, but yes, that's definitely a huge piece of it. And that goes back to having we always refer to it as the right ass in the right seat, right?
Mm,
But having the team in place to support you. And if you have to do everything virtually, then that can be hard.
yeah. Okay. Last thing is like lessons learned from virtual wholesaling.
Mm. Ooh. Man, I'm always going to go back to systems and processes. That's my engineer brain. Um, Having those systems in place and then being patient with it, I think is something that is important because it's not going to happen overnight. And you're going to run into issues, you're going to run into problems, and you're going to have to make changes. And so, having this dream in mind of, oh, I'm going to set this up and we're going to be good to go and we're just going to roll, that's just probably not going to happen 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 100.
Mhm.
So being able to have that flexibility is key. And going back and again, just making sure that the team that you have, the systems that you put in place, making sure that those are rock solid and that you set a good foundation is going to be the most important part. There
Mhm.
were several times where I ended up having to run up there in the middle of the week on a whim because the systems that we had failed. So all of a sudden, I got to make a 2.5, 3 hour drive out of my day, and that's just one way. So now it's 2.5, 3 hours, right? If I had anything else scheduled for that day, that's out the window. So, or it's you go into this emergency mode of, well, shoot, now I got to try to find somebody else to go and do this for me now, right? Seller's chomping at the bit. Maybe I try to get somebody out there by tomorrow or the following day, but you end up going into this emergency mode, and it's stressful. Yeah. So it also takes away from everything else that you're already currently doing back home in theory. Mm-hmm. So I think that those are the lessons learned, is really just making sure that everything that you have set up is solid, is probably the biggest piece.
Yeah. My lesson learned from this is like learning the quirks of the area. So for those of you that are listening, we're in the Virginia Beach area. One thing we do not have is basements. We do not have basements. It doesn't work with our location, with flooding and all that jazz. Apparently in Nova, basements are a big thing, whether they're furnished or not furnished, renovated or not renovated. I don't know. I don't remember the terms, but it really threw us off. Huh?
Yeah. Finished and unfinished.
Yeah, finished and unfinished. Yeah. It threw us off because that square footage can count. And so learning the little quirks about the new market that you're going into, because we were like, what the hell are these people talking about? Yes. And I think it did work out in our favor, but we were still like, what just happened?
Yes. Well, and also taking it more to, when it comes to Fredericksburg, specifically the Spotsylvania, Stafford areas, those are a lot more rural than they are urban. Whereas down here in Virginia Beach, I mean, we're incredibly urban, right? So it's different from a comps perspective as well, because now you're not targeting just a specific neighborhood or inside your major roadways and waterways and train tracks, right? Now you're looking at like, well, shoot, I've got a lot of countryside here where maybe the closest rehab sale is like 8 miles down the road. Well, shit, does that even apply? I don't know. Those were questions that we had to get answered from my mother-in-law and from other realtors, other people in the area that we had networked with in order to better understand, how do we run our comps here versus how we run them down here? Because it was different. And I think the basement thing was a huge piece. And thank you for reminding me on that, because yeah, that was a game changer for sure. The first property that we got under contract, sitting there looking at the finished square footage, and I'm like, I don't get it. The seller's telling me we're 2,600 square feet, but I'm only seeing 14 or 1,500, and I don't understand. And then devil's in the details for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Anything else you want to say before we end this episode?
No, I think I've been long-winded enough. I'll save everybody.
Okay. Well, thanks for talking to me today. And thank you everyone for listening or watching on YouTube. You can find us at wholesalingoutofthebox.com on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. We're pretty much everywhere. So if you could please like or subscribe and leave us a comment or a review, that would be wonderful. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks everyone. Bye.